Okay, this video is going to cover a lot of the general changes to the FAQ in July 2026, which is also an errata, which is also a rules patch. I don't think it goes far enough, but we'll get to that. And then we're going to look especially at the Adepta Sororitas. There will be separate videos for the Gene Stealer Cult and Imperial Agents and Deathwatch. You know, the factions that I'm known for. Starting with the main rules changes, officially there are no core rules changes, which is interesting as a choice. It's the same as before, so a lot of what I was hoping for is not here. It's far smaller than expected, and for all the changes they have made, I'm not going to let Games Workshop off the hook for releasing a core rulebook unfinished, then adding more rules in the app, then doing a faction patch pack to make sure the factions work as they go into 10th edition to 11th edition, which was not done correctly, and so this is still a continuation of that initial patch. So this patch is fixing a lot of the basics that should have been already done, and we're going to get another patch next month at the end of August, and then in September the regular balance patch along with inevitable fixes to the Orc and Space Marine Codex that overrules the army book probably before the book is ever released. Again, Games Workshop releases things unfinished or not properly tested. To look at all of the rules changes and how many of the errors, you know, from the video series about the errors, which is a video series, that multi-hour list of rules and which ones have been fixed, we'll have to cover that in another video. Some things that haven't changed I think should have been changed just as basic stuff. Deadly Demise currently applies to all models in the unit as long as you have one model with Deadly Demise. You can't say it only applies to the character model that has it and not all the models in the unit. It says right there, all the models in this unit. It isn't a keyword, it's an ability. It says it applies to all models in the unit, same as any other character ability that says all models in the unit. So Battle Sisters be poppin' cause Junith is hanging out with them with her Deadly Demise 1. Precision still applies to all attacks of the same kind, not just precision attacks with line of sight to the target. That is weird, and you can only target one enemy character with precision. So if there's two enemy characters in the unit, as is getting more common, you can kill one of them with precision, then the bodyguard gets in the way for the other one. Emperor's Children still can't take Horus Heresy Legends. That's a really easy fix they could have done. Not done. And the tournament base size guide, which everyone takes as gospel on the base sizes you're meant to have, still has incorrect bases for the Red Corsairs and their Reeve Captain. Many fixes to do. I was hoping that we would get more PDFs to help with the rules. Like all the expanded rules that appear only in the app if you have a Warhammer Plus account and you sign in with the Warhammer Plus account into the Warhammer app, then you can see more of the rules. That's not released as a PDF. So healing. Hey, the Necron Army rule is changed to be just heals D3, but you can't see how that rule works unless you look on the app. The Combat Patrol rules are meant to be released. They're not as a PDF, which is easy to see and read for anyone with a computer. It's only on the app, and I can't figure out how to work it. That may be a me problem. But the missions, I can't find them. How you use it on War Journal, where you have one Combat Patrol fight another Combat Patrol, I can't get that to work for Combat Patrol. If you know how to get it to work, please help in the comments. I'm gonna need a step-by-step, otherwise you can't play Combat Patrol on the app. Maybe something is missing there. I have updated the app. I just don't understand how to get it to play a game of Combat Patrol. This is also a first balance patch to fix some of the problems, as Imperial Guard is currently way down in tournament wins, which is the stats that Games Workshop generally uses for fixing things. Also, casually, you know that Imperial Guard are not doing great. I'll talk about Imperial Guard with the Gene Stealer Cult in that coming video. Orcs and Necrons are doing rather well. Orc Boys are still very cheap, and their edit is not really changing much. They're still very cheap, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th unit are a bit more expensive. I think it doesn't show the previous points that they were. It doesn't say, hey, it's gone up some points compared to last time, and because this wasn't a PDF, I haven't saved what it looked like. So I'm assuming that there was no additional cost for the 4th, 5th, and 6th Boy Squad before, and now there is. Minor penalties to the Green Tide. You can now take Gretchen without a Runt Herd, I assume using the Armageddon rules, Are we maybe getting ready for the Orc Codex, where that'll be the case, where you can take Gretchen without Runt Herd and the Runt Herd is extra? There may be a reboxing of the Runt Herd and Gretchen coming. I would expect so. But the Necron penalties haven't quite appeared. Like the Tacoma FAQ, which we took as generally and has generally been a template that Games Workshop can make this FAQ from. Nothing to say you cannot resurrect characters that are destroyed, so if you precision out a Necron character, they will still come back when you heal them. Heal does not seem to exclude characters, unless there's some edit on the app that I haven't found. It's standard healing. Several of the Cryptex are no longer leaders, they're support, but you can still attach them even if there's a Royal Warden or Noble already attached to the unit, and then on death they split into their original starting strength. Why are we adding that rule when there's an existing rule on the app that says ignore any rule that says that? What are we doing? Why are we updating a rule that's already ignored by an existing rule? And another penalty that could have happened to the Necrons, in the Tacoma FAQ, there was a rule to say the first thing you do at the end of the command phase is check to see who controls an objective, then you do everything else, like healing. So you couldn't have Necrons heal onto an objective, then score it. That has not been a rule that's added, so you can heal your Necrons onto an objective, then score the objective. A lot of other rules changes seem basic. However, they've clarified that yes, you can only generate one command point per battle round. But that rule is only for the event pack, the doubles pack, the teams pack, the Dominator's campaign deck mission pack, and it's not in the core rules. We don't have one unified way to play. And the event pack is expressly not about the pick up and play games you have. If you search the app, you will find the event exceptions, but not the core rules exceptions. That has not been added to the Universal Rules update. There are already exceptions made for the Imperial Knights completing a deed, because that rule is in the Codex that if there is a restriction to say stops you from generating more than one command point per battle round, you can ignore that for their army rule. So their army rule still works. In the article, it says the dedicated transports like Rhinos, Devilfish and Chimeras now must start the game with a unit embarked inside. I cannot find where that rule is in any of the rules packs, even the event packs, even the faction packs. I can't find this rule. Where is this rule? Why must you play hide and seek with your rules so people are struggling to find the rules to play the game? If one person says this is a rule, another person says it's not a rule, you've got to find the rule, and it's hard to find the rule. This is a rule that's been added to the app, and you have to find it in the app, and it's under the transport section. It's not about the army construction step or starting the game, as it had been in previous editions, so that was the first place I looked. There's the rule on the app. Same with units can only make one single normal move per phase. I know where this is in the Tacoma FAQ, but it's not in any of the updated rules. Is this perhaps an article built of lies? Another Games Workshop Warhammer community article that does not tell the truth? Those have become very common recently, especially when referring to rules in Warhammer 40,000. But this is also an update to the app that you have to find. 09.05.01, it's something you could have skipped over and not known about because it's not in any of the PDFs as a changelog thing to say, hey, this has changed. Something might have changed around the shooting phase as well. Did you check all of the shooting phase bits in the app? If not, you'll never know. Oh, speaking of articles of lies, the community made a big thing about this section that Games Workshop put in a previous article to say that regardless of game size, you can pick any one detachment. We didn't know if this was for doubles or if it was going to be a general rule for the whole game. I have checked all of the different muster army steps of the app, and it hasn't updated. So if this is a change that's coming to the doubles pack or the general rules, it's not in this update. It may be in another update in another month's time, but if people are saying, oh, don't you know you can use any detachment regardless of game size, that isn't a rule. It was something mentioned as a possible rule in an article and isn't yet a rule. In the event pack, It says that anything that scores at the end of the game is scored at the end of the game, not in Battle Round 5. Good. And this change has also been made to the app, so there is an additional step, the end of game scoring step, and it's no longer tied to the 5th battle round, where you could very easily cap out your maximum primary victory points just from doing your primary mission, and then you couldn't really get anything from the end of the game, because you already had your 15 victory points. Another clarification, yes, just for the event pack, not for any particular card deck rules. If you remove a marker, that removes any ability and scoring that's tied to it. So if you were wrangling in Disruption versus Recon, the decoy tokens lose the decoy aspect, but they get to keep scoring victory points. No, it was obvious that no. You've removed the token, but now it's saying no. You cannot do an action on 3 objectives if you go first, and all of those in your opponent's territory, at least partially, and then score 12 victory points on primary mission every turn from now on until the end of the game without ever doing anything else. That was obvious to anyone who wasn't trying to get their law degree in rules. Right, the sisters. We have an FAQ clarifying how our army rule works, and it is the same as the Tacoma FAQ. Because fast rolling now exists, how do Miracle Dice work with fast rolling? So you fast roll all your hit rolls, all your wound rolls, and all your save rolls. Because you're not rolling them individually one at a time, that's not an option. You have to make any substitutions before rolling that set of dice. So we can't roll 2 melter shots and then use a Miracle Dice on the 3rd one to guarantee at least 1 melter hits. We would have to do it beforehand, then roll the other 2, and then see that, okay, we do have melter hits anyway, we may have wasted the Miracle Dice, and now it's overkill. That's unfortunate. Damage rolls remain basically the same. Because you don't fast roll damage rolls, you can roll a damage roll, then use a Miracle Dice to guarantee the destruction of 1 enemy model, then roll the next damage roll in the series. There's nothing for the damage roll to say you substitute the dice before any damage rolls are made. You substitute a damage roll before making the roll. It is worse than the previous edition when we could substitute a Miracle Dice partway through just to guarantee a model lives, otherwise we may end up wasting a Miracle Dice on an armor save that we're going to fail anyway. That's unfortunate, but it's telling you, use your Miracle Dice for damage rolls where they're still really effective, and don't forget you can use them for advance rolls and for battle shock tests. If we are forced to take a battle shock test in the enemy movement phase, you cannot use the Insane Bravery stratagem because it's not happening in our command phase. But we can use Miracle Dice to guarantee that we pass the Battle Shock test so we're not Battle Shocked. That is important. High Miracle Dice are good for that. There is no change to how we generate Miracle Dice. We have to lose the whole unit to get Miracle Dice. That is character plus bodyguard. Or it may be 2 characters plus bodyguard and then you get 1 Miracle Dice. Sisters are a little bit worse off than we were last edition. Our dedicated transports are a little bit cheaper because dedicated transports are not that amazing in 11th edition because 2 things have changed from 10th edition to 11th edition. When you get out of a destroyed transport, hazardous tests are failed on a 1 or a 2 rather than on a 1. That's twice as many dead sisters as previous. And you emergency disembark from a transport before you roll to see if it explodes, so you can be hit by the explosion, which you couldn't be in 10th edition. So a slight points decrease on the Immolator, slight points decrease on the Rhino. The Sororitas Rhino should be in green because previously 4th, 5th and 6th were 75 points regardless. The points have only gone down on the first 3. That's all good. Let's start tying this into detachments. Since we're talking of transports, the Bringers of Flame detachment is reduced to 2 detachment points. Now one of the articles that Games Workshop previously had where they said you could combine the Bringers of Flame with one of these new 1 detachment point detachments, now it's possible. The other thing that's changed for the Bringers of Flame, its disposition is no longer Purge the Foe, for which it was rather well suited, its priority assets. Even though I think it's best suited for reconnaissance because it has speedy transports. You can advance and then your units can disembark. But which kind of disembark hasn't been fixed. Strictly speaking, as the rules are, you would have to do a combat disembark. You make a hazard roll for every model in the unit, and then they're battle shocked and not eligible to charge, but can still shoot. This is because the transport did not make a normal move, and the unit did not disembark from the transport while it remained stationary. This is a rule, that hasn't been fixed in this patch. So Battle Sisters or Dominions flinging themselves violently from the transport, injuring themselves, and then trying to get up and shoot is what will happen if you use the Bringers of Flame stratagem to advance a transport and then disembark. But okay, it's priority assets. If you want to play priority assets and you want to have one of your 1 detachment points, you don't need to take Hallowed Martyrs, which is our only 3 detachment point detachment. The Army of Faith has changed from being the detachment that had no changes whatsoever from the 10th edition codex, which was perfect. Now they're changing it. The Blinding Radiance stratagem no longer affects non-infantry. This is a really good stratagem because it is -1 to hit, which stacks with the benefit of cover, which is -1 to the enemy ballistic skill. So it was really good to shield a Seraphim unit and sisters that were in cover and a Castigator or Immolators. Now it only affects infantry. You can only use it on infantry, and the aura only affects infantry, so it won't affect tanks. But thankfully, it still stacks with the benefit of cover. It's really strong as a stratagem. The Light of the Emperor stratagem is 2 command points. This is an aura from jump pack units to basically ignore cover, because it's ignore penalties to ballistic skill, plus ignore penalties like -1 to the wound rolls. It's a good stratagem, and it's a shame it's gone to 2 command points because I just started using it. Otherwise, the many words that were in there and I couldn't figure out all the time whether it let me ignore a particular enemy ability. The Angelic Descent stratagem hasn't got a change, so it didn't get the exception to say that if you leave the board on turn 1, you can arrive in turn 1. The rule of you can only make ingress moves from turn 2 will still apply to Angelic Descent, even if you left in the enemy's turn 1 and you have your turn 1 to go. Your unit will be waiting in reserves through your turn 1, through the enemy turn 2, unless you use rapid ingress, and then they'll arrive in your turn 2. Many other detachments that have an ability to leave and return have a special thing that says you can leave and return in the first turn. With these changes to the Army of Faith, Seraphim are cheaper. 10 points cheaper for 5 models, 10 points cheaper for 10 models, and your third unit is also 10 points cheaper. The Zephyrim are also cheaper for the first and second unit. The third unit now has an additional cost. This was not there previously, this has been added in, so it is correct that it's in orange, as there is now a penalty of some sort to taking your third unit. While we're mentioning the Army of Faith, I do recommend taking Junith Arawita in your Army of Faith army. She used to have another ability that was like Blinding Radiance, so enemies were -1 to hit regardless. Her ability has been changed. It's no longer strictly -1 to hit. Her unit has stealth, so that is -1 to the enemy ballistic skill. Stealth is the benefit of cover, so if you're in cover, it won't stack with her ability. Stealth and the benefit of cover are the same, so it's -1 ballistic skill regardless, not -2. But in melee, she still has the -1 to hit effect. So no longer -2 to hit at range, still a good unit, still worth taking, is 10 points cheaper because of it. Next, the Hallowed Martyrs. Divine Intervention has changed once again. In good news for it, it now clarifies that there is a destroyed character model that you set back up on the battlefield rather than the last destroyed model of the unit. So none of this, they precisioned out our character, then the unit was destroyed, so we're bringing back a basic Sacresant if we use this ability. No, now it is a character model, but when they come back, they are kicked out of the unit that they were with. They're no longer part of an attached unit, they have a starting strength of 1. This was basically to stop the enemy destroying a unit of Sacresants with the Hospitaller, then bringing back the Hospitaller with this stratagem, then the Hospitaller brings back some Sacresants with their ability to heal. I suppose that was rather cruel. And so the Hospitaller is 10 points cheaper, whether it's your first one or your second or further one. That's good, and it's a very good benefit to, say, the Champions of Faith who will be taking Hospitallers with Sacresants. Similar to the Hospitaller, the Imagifier is cheaper. Finally, after an error it seemed like a year ago, where the Imagifier was apparently -10 points but still showed its previous points value of 65 points, now she's gone down to 55 points, and at that point level I think is much more worth taking. It's a 2+ armor save and a 4+ invulnerable save for your unit. That is very annoying to get through. At 55 points, that's a lot more reasonable. However, with the Hospitaller only 10 points behind, more people will probably be taking the Hospitaller, especially when in 11th edition you can lose the entire bodyguard unit, and as long as the Hospitaller is still alive, they can continue bringing back models. While Divine Intervention has had a rules change to say, okay, in that case, they come back as a unit of 1, Celestine hasn't had that change. So when Celestine is destroyed, on a 2+, she comes back, and is still considered part of the unit, and if she was the only one left, she can use her healing tears to bring back models. She resurrects her squad in the normal way, even if everyone was destroyed. There is no change to her rules. The Sacred Champions and the Champions of Faith remain the same. Celestian Sacresants are cheaper. Even though it's shown there in red, they have not gone up in points, they've gone down. Because now your first and second units cost 75 points for 5 or 150 points for 10, rather than only the first unit. And the second unit was 90 points or 165 points, now it's down to 85 points or 160 points. All of this is good. I don't know why it's in red. With all of the changes, which generally are very positive, I've gained about 50 points on my army list. The Sanctified Orators detachment that focuses around characters has had its disposition changed from Purge the Foe to Disruption. So if you really wanted to play Disruption, you have an easy way to do so as it's 1 detachment point. But it means we no longer have an easy way to do Purge the Foe, because Bringers of Flame and Sanctified Orators that were Purge the Foe are no longer Purge the Foe. There has been a clarification of sorts to the one enhancement in this detachment, the Hag enhancement. You put it on an Adepta Sororitas character model, excluding penitent units, rather than putting it on a character unit. So there's no confusion that otherwise you could put it on the war suits if there were Paragon war suits with Morven Val, because that becomes a character unit, and you would put it on a warsuit model. Now it has to be a character model, it would have to go on Val, and you can't put it on Morven Val because she is an epic hero. This detachment focuses on characters. Now Intransia Frey is 15 points cheaper, but Morven Val is 15 points more expensive. 200 points for Morven Val, which is more than a Paragon warsuit unit. I can see some of the logic behind, okay, well, Morven Val is such a force multiplier that from a unit of Paragon Warsuits, you're essentially getting 2 Paragon Warsuits worth of power with the full rerolls to hit and the full rerolls to wound. Her own combat ability isn't that amazing, and I'm not a big Morven Val fan, but at that cost, you may want to consider having a second Paragon Warsuit unit with 2 multi-melters for the same cost as Morven Val going in your Paragon Warsuit unit. It would be nice to see a change from what has been the archetype for most of last edition, which was 1 Paragon Warsuit unit and Morven Val, and never any more Paragon Warsuits, and every list had them. I tried to make as many lists as possible without Morven Val, but she is a very useful piece. You'll have to let me know if you think 200 points is too expensive, or if she's still an auto-include if you're taking Paragon Warsuits. Especially in, like, the Champions of Faith, which focuses around them. The last detachment to get changes is the Penitent Host. Its force disposition has been changed from Take and Hold, which it was terrible at, to Purge the Foe, which much more suits its style of running at the enemy and murdering them. If any detachment was going to be consecrating areas of the board with blood, it would be the Penitent Host. I can sort of see where Games Workshop was coming from by putting it as Take and Hold, because one of the stratagems gives you sticky objectives if you die on it. But I was always saying, Purge the Foe is a much more appropriate disposition for it, so I'm glad this is our only Purge the Foe disposition. Games Workshop doesn't like too many people having access to Purge the Foe. I'm thinking with dispositions, it's kind of annoying that they are tied to one particular detachment. Like, Reconnaissance might be absolutely your playstyle, and you also love Bringers of Flame, but unless you add Chorus of Condemnation, you can't play Reconnaissance. Unless you choose to with friends, because it's fun. Already I find I'm playing the same missions over and over again, and we've only had the game out for a month. Picking the mission you're playing can be a lot more enjoyable. But all of these changes to detachments and points very quickly into the edition is why it would not be sensible for me to make army lists and detachment breakdowns just yet, much as I want to, because it would be outdated far too quickly. Remember, there's going to be another points change in a month's time, and there'll be another points change and balance patch in another month's time at the end of September. The Penitent Host has generally been improved. 3 of the enhancements are cheaper. Psalm of Righteous Judgments, 10 points cheaper. Refrain of Enduring Faith, 10 points cheaper. Catechism of Divine Penitence, 5 points cheaper. Now, there's a change, allegedly, in the faction pack for the Penitent Host Catechism of Divine Penitence. I don't think it's necessary. We have to change the rules to say a Canoness, Palatine, or Minister and Priest model gets the Penitent keyword, basically deleting the line that says, this unit can be attached to Repentia. But when you look at the field manual, it says, Leader, Repentia Squad. Why remove the line? This is only going to confuse people. I think it's okay to have duplicate or clarifying rules. The app allows you to attach your Canoness or Palatine or Canoness with Jump Pack or Minister and Priest to a Repentia Squad, but you may not know that that's an option unless the enhancement would say so. Removing that sentence, it seems so unnecessary. But a tactic that can still be used is to attach, say, the Canoness with Jump Pack to Zephyrim, and now more of the detachment stratagems will affect them as they are now a Penitent unit, but be wary because they are not Penitent models. And the Repentia Squad has come down in points. They are now cheaper than Celestian Sacresants. It was horrible that they were not previously. And 2 more changes. The Novitiate Squad has come down 10 points. Very nice. They're now on 90 points. And the Dominions have come down by 10 points to 90 points. Dominions are competing with Retributors for the use lots of Melter to shoot the enemy, and with Sanctifiers to use lots of Flamers and Scout, and with Battle Sisters for have 10 Sisters with the Simulacrum. And the Dominion Squad is still charged 5 points per Melter gun. So let's end by thinking about Dominions and Battle Sisters. Battle Sisters were more popular in the poll. Will a 10-point drop on Dominions change people's minds? This video gives a breakdown of all of the tactics and things that the Dominion Squad can do, and comparing that to the tactics that the Battle Sister Squad can do, so you can decide which ones to include in your army, in what quantity, and have a great day of 40k.